In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, more than 2,000 miles away from the nearest continent, lies one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth. A small volcanic island surrounded by endless blue water. No large forests, no major rivers. No visible signs of a once powerful civilization. And yet, scattered across this remote landscape stand hundreds of enormous stone statues. Silent, motionless, watching. These are the Moai of Easter Island. Massive, human-like figures carved from solid rock, some standing over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons. Each statue has a distinct face. Long noses, deep-set eyes. Strong, expressionless features, and all of them appear to be looking inland, as if they are watching over something that no longer exists. For centuries, these statues have puzzled explorers, scientists, and historians. Because the biggest question is not just why they were built, but how. The island itself, Easter Island, also known as Rapa Nui, was settled by Polynesian people hundreds of years ago. A small community living in one of the most remote locations on Earth. They had no metal tools, no advanced machinery, no large animals to help transport heavy materials. And yet, they managed to carve and move some of the largest stone statues ever created by any ancient culture. Some Moai were transported miles from the quarry where they were carved, across rough terrain, over hills and uneven ground, without wheels, without cranes, without modern engineering. Even today, moving objects of that size would require heavy machinery and advanced planning. So, how did an isolated island society achieve something so extraordinary? Early European explorers who first arrived on the island in the 18th century were equally confused. They found the statues standing across the landscape, but the civilization that built them seemed to have declined. Many of the statues had been toppled. The island's population had dramatically decreased, and the once thriving culture appeared to be struggling to survive. It was as if the creators of the Moai had vanished, leaving only their stone creations behind. For years, theories began to spread. Some believed the statues were built by a lost advanced civilization. Others suggested outside contact or unknown technology. But modern archaeology tells a more complex story, because the mystery of Easter Island is not just about the statues. It is about what happened to the people who built them. Recent research suggests that at one point the island may have supported a much larger population than it does today. There were more trees, more resources, and a society capable of organizing massive construction projects. But something changed. Environmental evidence shows that large areas of forest were cut down over time. Trees disappeared, resources became scarce, and the island's ecosystem began to collapse. But even this does not fully explain the greatest mystery. Because long before the society began to decline, they had already completed one of the most astonishing engineering achievements in human history. Hundreds of giant statues, carved, transported, and raised across an isolated island in the middle of the ocean. The deeper scientists investigate, the more questions emerge. Who organized this massive effort? How were the statues moved without modern tools? And why did the construction suddenly stop? Because hidden somewhere within the story of Easter Island is a truth that challenges everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. And the answer may not be what anyone expected. For decades, one question has dominated the mystery of Easter Island. Not why the statues were built, but how. How did an isolated island society, without metal tools or machines, carve and transport massive stone figures weighing dozens of tons? At the center of this mystery lies a place unlike anywhere else on the island. A volcanic crater known as Rano Raraku. This is where the majority of the Moai statues were carved. And what archaeologists discovered here changed everything. Scattered across the slopes of the crater are hundreds of statues in different stages of completion. Some are fully carved but still attached to the bedrock. Others are partially buried, with only their heads visible above the ground. And some appear to have been abandoned mid-construction, as if the workers simply stopped and never returned. This quarry reveals an important truth. The statues were not created randomly across the island. They were carefully designed, carved, and prepared in one central location before being moved to their final destinations. But this only deepens the mystery. because moving a statue weighing 50, 60, even 80 tons across rough volcanic terrain without wheels or animals seems almost impossible. Early theories suggested the statues were dragged on wooden sleds. Others believed they were rolled on logs. But both ideas created a serious problem. Easter Island had very limited trees, and by the time Europeans arrived, most of the island's forests had already disappeared. So, where did the wood come from? And how could such a method support the movement of hundreds of massive statues? Then, a more unusual theory began to gain attention. A theory that at first sounded almost unbelievable. What if the statues were never dragged at all? What if they were made to move, standing upright? Researchers studying the shape of the Moai noticed something unusual. The statues are slightly curved at the base. Their center of gravity allows them to tilt forward and backward, almost like a person shifting their weight while walking. Experiments were conducted using replica statues. Teams used ropes attached to both sides of the statue. By pulling the ropes in a coordinated rhythm, left, right, the statue began to rock side to side, and slowly, it moved forward, step by step, as if it were walking. This became known as the walking statues theory, and it may explain how the people of Easter Island transported these enormous figures across the island without wheels or large amounts of timber. But even this explanation raises more questions, because moving a single statue this way would require careful coordination and a large group of people. Moving hundreds of them across miles of rugged terrain would have required organization, planning, and leadership on a massive scale, which suggests something important. The society that built the Moai was far more advanced and structured than it might appear. They were not simply carving statues. They were executing complex engineering projects, coordinating labor, managing resources, and shaping the entire landscape of their island. But as archaeologists continued studying the site, they noticed something even more mysterious. Many statues along the transport routes appear to have been abandoned before reaching their final destinations. Some lie face down, others are tilted to one side, almost as if something interrupted the process. Something forced the builders to stop, and then never return. At the quarry itself, dozens of unfinished statues remain frozen in time. Tools were left behind, work suddenly ended. No clear explanation. It is as if the entire construction effort came to an abrupt halt. But why? What could cause a civilization capable of such incredible achievements to suddenly stop building its most important monuments? Because the deeper researchers investigate the engineering behind the Moai, the clearer it becomes that this was not just a cultural project. By the time European explorers first set foot on Easter Island in the 18th century, something had already gone terribly wrong. The statues were still there, standing across the landscape, silent, unmoving. But the society that had built them was no longer the same. Many of the Moai had been deliberately toppled. Some lay face down, partially buried in the earth. Others were broken, abandoned, or left unfinished. The island itself felt different. Less alive, less powerful. As if something had drained the strength of the civilization that once thrived there. For years, one explanation dominated the story. A theory that seemed simple and terrifying. That the people of Easter Island had destroyed their own world. According to this idea, the island was once covered in forests, tall palm trees stretching across the land. But in order to transport the massive Moai statues, the inhabitants cut down trees for ropes, rollers, and construction. As the population grew and more statues were built, the demand for resources increased. Trees were cut faster than they could regrow. Eventually, the forests disappeared. Without trees, the ecosystem collapsed. Soil erosion damaged agriculture. Food supplies became unstable, and the society began to weaken. Some researchers even suggested that conflict broke out between rival groups. Statues were toppled during these conflicts as symbols of power were destroyed. A once organized civilization descended into chaos. For many years, this became the dominant explanation. A warning story of environmental collapse caused by human activity. But in recent decades, new evidence has challenged this idea, because the truth may be far more complex Archaeologists studying the island have found signs that the people adapted to difficult conditions. They developed innovative farming techniques using rocks to protect crops from wind and preserve moisture. They created systems that allowed them to survive even as resources became limited, which suggests something surprising. The people of Easter Island were not simply destroying their environment without understanding the consequences. They were actively trying to survive. So, if environmental collapse alone does not explain what happened, what does? Some researchers now believe that the final blow to the island's society came from outside forces. When Europeans arrived, they did not just bring new technology. They brought disease, illnesses to which the island's population had no immunity. Entire communities may have been devastated within a short period of time. Later, in the 19th century, slave traders raided the island, capturing many of its people and removing them from their homeland. This further reduced the population and disrupted the social structure. The combined impact of disease, forced labor, and outside interference may have accelerated the collapse of the traditional way of life. And suddenly, the story of Easter Island changes. It is no longer just a story of a civilization destroying itself. It becomes a story of resilience, interrupted by forces beyond its control. A society that built incredible monuments, adapted to one of the most isolated environments on Earth, and then faced challenges that no civilization could easily survive. Today, the Moai statues still stand across the island. Some restored, some still fallen. All of them watching over a land that continues to reveal its secrets. And modern researchers are still uncovering new details about how these statues were built, moved, and used. But perhaps the most important discovery is not about the statues themselves. It is about the people who created them, because the descendants of the island's original inhabitants still live there today, preserving their culture, protecting their history, and reminding the world that the story of Easter Island is not just about mystery. It is about human ambition, ingenuity, survival, and the fragile balance between civilization and the world around it. The statues may be silent, but the story they represent is still being told.